The Fed is trapped. And that is very bad news if you're waiting for housing to get cheaper. Because right now, everybody is still waiting for the same little miracle. Rates come down, mortgage payments get easier, housing unlocks, buyers come back, everybody breathes again. Okay? But what if that rescue doesn't come? Or at least, what if it doesn't come fast enough to matter? Quick favor before we go deeper. I'm a small new YouTuber, and if you like these straight plain English breakdowns, hit subscribe. It helps YouTube push this to more people who actually want the real story. Okay, so because the Fed is not sitting there with one clean problem to solve, it's getting hit from every direction at once. Oil prices are moving up because of the war and the blockade pressure. Tariffs are still making prices harder to predict. The job market looks weaker under the surface. And on top of all of that, Trump is pressuring the Fed to cut rates, while Powell is trying not to make the central bank look like it's being dragged around by politics. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. This is the Fed standing in the middle of a mess and trying not to make the wrong thing worse. Cut too soon, and inflation can come back harder. Hold too long, and housing stays frozen, debt gets heavier, and regular people keep getting squeezed. And oil is making that harder. Because higher oil doesn't just mean you pay more at the pump. It means commuting costs more. Groceries cost more. Shipping costs more. Businesses face higher costs, and inflation gets harder to kill. So now the Fed has to look at that and say, okay, can we really cut aggressively while energy is pushing prices back up? That's where the housing rescue story starts getting shaky. Because rates can help housing, but only if inflation gives the Fed room. And if oil keeps pushing costs higher, that room gets smaller. Now, here's the other side of it. The job market isn't exactly healthy either. Powell basically admitted something important. If you don't already have a job, breaking in is getting harder. Quits are low. Hires are low. There isn't much strong new job creation. So, from far away, the labor market might look balanced. But if you're actually trying to get hired, it can feel locked. And that matters for housing too. Because people do not casually take on giant mortgage payments when their job situation feels shaky. They don't upgrade homes. They don't move across the country. They don't stretch into a payment unless they believe the paycheck is going to keep coming. So, housing is getting squeezed from both sides. Rates are too high for buyers. Job confidence is too weak for people to feel safe. And oil is pushing the cost of living higher at the exact wrong time. That is not a recovery setup. That is a trap. Weak buyers, sticky inflation, high rates, rising energy costs, political pressure on the Fed, and a central bank that cannot easily move without making something else worse. That's the part people keep missing. This isn't just the Fed held rates. That's the boring headline. The real story is that the Fed may not have an easy way out. And if the Fed doesn't have an easy way out, housing probably doesn't either. Because the whole housing market is waiting for relief. Buyers need lower payments. Sellers need more buyers. Builders need affordability to stop choking demand. Renters need some path that doesn't feel completely insane. But the thing that could help, lower rates, is exactly the thing inflation keeps making harder. That's why this matters. Not because Fed meetings are exciting, they're not. But because the Fed's trap becomes your trap. Their rate problem becomes your mortgage problem. Their inflation problem becomes your grocery bill. Their labor market problem becomes your job security problem. And their political pressure problem becomes a credibility problem for the whole economy. So, the practical takeaway is pretty simple. Do not build your whole plan around fast rate cuts saving you. Maybe rates fall, maybe they don't. But if energy prices keep pushing inflation pressure back into the system, the Fed may stay cautious longer than people want. So if you're trying to buy, refinance, move, or invest, run the numbers under a world where relief takes longer. Not forever, but longer. Because that's the risk right now. People are still planning around the clean version of the story. The clean version says, inflation cools, the Fed cuts, mortgage rates fall, housing wakes back up. But the messy version says, oil pushes inflation higher, the job market weakens, the Fed hesitates, rates stay annoying, housing stays stuck. And honestly, the messy version is starting to look a lot more realistic. That's why this is bad news for housing. Not because nobody wants homes. People want homes. They just can't make the math work. And if the Fed stays trapped, that math may stay ugly longer than people are ready for. That is the real story. Not just that the Fed held rates, but that the Fed is stuck between inflation, oil, jobs, politics, and housing. And when the Fed is stuck, everyone waiting for an easy housing rescue might be waiting longer than they think.